Before we start with today's seminar, I just want to announce that our next one will be January. We won't have one in December. And it will be on open space, January 31st with Nika Akinapura and Alex Bach. And you can find more details on our website. And I'll put that in the chat. And today we have Dr. Shannon Schmoll from Abrams Planetarium, I think, Michigan State, right? And she is the president-elect of IPS. Does that start in January or on some other time?
January 1st.
Okay. She worked on the Big Astronomy Project, which was a big NSF project. And she and two other authors published in the IPS Planetarium about a year ago on the material that she's going to describe today. And so I'll go ahead and let her take over.
Right. Well, thanks everybody for having me. I'm gonna, I think, keep this fairly short in a description of the project and the research we did, and then we can open it up for more discussion. Like Rosemary said, I was on the Big Astronomy Project that has now wrapped up, but this was part of that project. We got a funding supplement around accessible materials. And so the research arm of the project studied captioning options in the dome by interviewing people who are members of the deaf and hard of hearing community in order to assess which types and technologies around captioning in planetariums were most effective and useful in the dome to have some data. And I will note that this is a small study. This is by no means the final answer to anything. It's just some data points to help us as we think through how we want to caption in a dome. So I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And go back to the first slide. Ooh, it's so pretty. Good. Okay. Can everyone see that? That nice little Sky Master there. All right. So this was a study that was done with Dr. Katie Hinko and Dr. Jessica Trucks as well. Jessica was going to join us, but she was not able to. That was the main research team that was working on Big Astronomy. And so just a general overview of what we're trying to do, and I think we all know this as planetarians, but captioning is a very key way to make sure that things are accessible, especially for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. But also a lot of people in general have been using captions a lot more when they watch television, for instance. So it's becoming a much more ubiquitous service and option when viewing things. But captioning is going to remain a very important aspect for accessibility. And in planetariums, that's no different. The difference with the planetarium, however, is that we are immersive. We are a dome environment. We might have a general focus area if we're in a unidirectional dome, but we often have things that are happening all over. And so you need to be able to hear or see the narration as it's going. So how do we maintain that immersivity and make that the same experience for someone who is reading captions as well? And I know that many planetarium systems do have the ability to import SRT files now. I think even when we were doing this study a few years ago, it wasn't as easy to do, and it's getting a lot easier. An SRT file is the caption file. So it is the words with the timestamp, and it says what time on a video you're supposed to put it up. And there's other technologies that are out there that have been floating around for a while around how we might be able to caption something. So we can put it on the dome. but there's also these glasses or handheld devices. And over the years, a lot of planetariums have come up with these idiosyncratic ways of doing it within their dome for their audiences. So knowing all these different options, can we test and compare them? And then also an aspect of this is, what is the cost? What is the setup? What is the reliability? These are all factors that we want to make sure we have some information on, because that will all affect sort of the sustainability of using these. So and just a quick note on definitions. This is also a reminder for me because there are these different types of captions, but you will hear things like open captions, and that's something that's actually burned into the video. You can't take it off. You can't turn it on and off. It's just there. There's closed captions, which you can turn on and off. So that's what you have on your TV. You can always say, yes, I want that, or no, I don't, or on a YouTube video, things like that. And then subtitles are going to be captions, but in a separate language from what is being spoken. So just a note on language as you learn and hear about captioning. So in particular for this study, we used 3 different methods of captioning a planetarium show. So we had a handheld device. So this was a small device about the size of my phone, maybe a little bit bigger, that the user would be able to hold with them as they looked around the dome. So this wasn't for everybody to use. It was for the one person who wanted captions. Similarly, there's the Epson glasses. So there I am modeling it so beautifully. Ooh. So these you put on over your eyes, and then on the glasses themselves, you see the caption. So as you move your head and look around, you are always looking through those glasses. And then the other one was on the dome itself, sort of front, center, low on the horizon, like you would think about with a television. So specifically, like I said, this was a part of the Big Astronomy project. So we used the Big Astronomy show as our testing show. So this is a 25-minute pre-recorded show. It is freely available if anyone wants them, or wants the show. And I do see a hand from Joe.
Sorry, I'm punching around on a little iPad here, so apologies.
Okay, all right, no worries. So we tested this with Big Astronomy. So we did it with the same show. And it was also valuable because we already had other data that we could go back and look at if we needed to from other shows that are more around the just how are people learning from this show? What are they taking away? And we did this at the California Academy of Sciences because they were the producer of the show and they had all the technology that we needed. So that was really helpful. And we were able to work with them in order to work with their community partners to recruit people to come in and watch the show. Okay. So what we did is we conducted focus groups with people. We had 2 shows a day of Big Astronomy at the planetarium that were the standard, regular, scheduled shows for the museum that day. So anyone who wanted to come see it could come see it. And then with the people we recruited who were deaf or hard of hearing, they had free entry into the museum and the show. And then afterwards, we went and recorded focus group interviews with the people who were there. Additionally, we talked to practitioners. So the people at the planetarium who were working to get these set up were working with the audience members to get them ready to sit down and watch the show, and had worked on the project in general so that we could kind of get that sense of like which one was easy to use, which one failed more, which one was harder to set up, and things like that. And then we also did an audience survey for everyone else in the audience, so hearing individuals who were also in the show, so that we could also assess if any of these captioning options were creating any distractions for others in the dome. And we didn't get a lot of data on that, and what we did get was nobody noticed anything, so it was any method seems to be okay in that regard. So the general outline timeline of this is prior to, we recruited the participants, again, through working with Cal Academy's various partnerships. We scheduled the shows, or Cal Academy scheduled the shows in advance so that they would be available. We hired ASL interpreters who came to the museum each day to work with us and help us in the focus groups. And we did provide incentives for anyone who participated to thank them for their time and feedback. And we did that in an amount in line with what the Academy tends to offer. We then, each day there were 2 shows, and each day we had a different device that we tested in each of those shows. So the first day, both shows, we tested the handheld device. The first show, we had one participant who was a member of the deaf and hard of hearing community. And then the second show, we did not have anyone else. So we interviewed the interpreter who was there with us, who was a CODA, so a child of a deaf adult. We would not interview them together because we wanted to focus on individuals who were deaf or hard of hearing. But we also wanted to get other data, so we would talk to the interpreters who were part of that culture as a child of a deaf adult. Second day, we used the glasses. So we had one participant who was hard of hearing and 5 more who were deaf. And we had also talked to the ASL interpreter that day, who was a different individual. And then on the third day, we used the captions on the dome, and we had 5 participants who were deaf again, and 1 ASL interpreter. And we had some overlap. There was a couple people who were there both on day 2 and 3, so they could offer slightly more comparison between the experiences. And then later we interviewed 4 staff members who had been working on the project. So these are the results that came out. We did record all of the data, so we were able to get a transcription and then use the videos to know who was actually talking and whether or not people were agreeing or not with what others were saying. And in general, to summarize what people were saying in these focus groups, for the handheld device, it was nice because you could take it and you could kind of customize what it looked like. You could change the size or the color of the text. It was also able to, you could choose different languages if you wanted. We didn't end up using that, but you could potentially send in multiple tracks and you could choose from which one you wanted. So if you did want subtitles versus captions, you could do that. And there could also be an option to pipe in a video of someone interpreting in ASL. So those are the advantages of this. And you could move it with you. You could go and look around like this and get your captions no matter where you looked. However, there are a lot of cons. So a lot of people were saying they weren't, or some of them, the folks who use them were not sure where to actually place it when they were looking. And it still kind of took away from watching the show because you'd have to look back and forth between the dome and the device. And also doing this for 30 minutes hurts your arms. You get tired. You don't want to keep doing that. So one solution offered was you could have the device mounted somehow, like on a stand or in front of the chair, which I know has been done before. But then you lose that ability to move it around as well. So there's a couple of quotes here from folks. So visually it was fine, but I couldn't figure out where I should hold the device. And there is no one visual focus like at the movie theater when you're looking around. So it worked. I know that we've used that before. A lot of places have, but there were definitely some complaints about holding that. So the glasses on the next day, they were actually attached to the handheld devices. It was the same system. So all those things that I said about the devices, about changing language or piping in an ASL interpretation, could also work on the glasses. And what's nice about them is that as you wear them, no matter where you move your head, you don't have to hold anything with your arms. It's just on your face. And as you move, you're always looking at the dome and the captions are just there. So that immersivity and that sort of darting back and forth doesn't happen. So that's great. The cons, however, were there was a high failure rate. There were 5 glasses and 2 of them stopped working fairly early on in the show. If you also already wear glasses or you have a cochlear implant, it was noted that they did not fit well with any other devices you might already have going on. Personally, I tried out the glasses like you saw. I did want to try and actually have an understanding of how they worked. And I did not last very long because they were really uncomfortable and heavy on my face, and it did not work so well with my glasses. It was also noted that the shape of those glasses, the framing it had, it did obstruct some of your view of the dome. And as you look through the glass itself, there was some diminished image quality. So it sort of blurred it a little bit. It kind of dimmed it a little bit as you were looking through it. And some folks also agreed that by wearing that, it made them feel very conspicuous. And like in a quote, you can see, wanted an experience a movie like anyone else, but putting on the glasses made me feel like a robot. And so it was that feeling of othering that came with those glasses. But they liked that you could take the captions with you. So the recommendations that sort of came out of that is glasses could be useful. These particular model and design of the Epson glasses were not great. They were uncomfortable, they were heavy, they didn't all work very well. But if you could have something that was more reliable with a different style of frame that maybe wasn't so heavy and bulky and clearer and bigger, that might be better. I have seen the new ones that are coming out from Meta. Like I know Zuckerberg kind of modeled some of those, so maybe something like that would be better. So it sounds like glasses would be great if the design could be improved, but with the current versions that were on the market at the time, not as great. And then the last day was on the dome. So the pros that came out of that was it was easily available, and it's just there. And so anyone who might not identify as someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, but does have some hearing loss, could use those captions, and they're just there. And so that does make it a more inclusive experience for a lot more people who might not know or think or want to ask for the captions along the way. It's also very familiar because people are used to captions. It was very intuitive to be able to kind of look at the captions and then up and around. So the cons were that you could only ever offer one language at a time, and you couldn't really change it yourself. And because they're at the bottom, sometimes you do lose a little bit of that immersivity. But a lot of folks were also saying it was fine. And the other one was folks were also noting that within the deaf community, a lot of people, ASL is their first language, and they learn English a lot later. And so they might not be literate in English when they are in ASL. So having captions specifically and not an ASL interpretation option is a limiting factor. Which is not to say we can't do that on the dome also, but it's something we want to make sure we think about. And then a lot of the other cons that came up were about the caption choices specifically that can be changed. So the white color that was used was too, it blended in with certain parts of the video too often, or it wasn't big enough. So tweaks to how it's actually captioned would have helped a lot. Oh, I did not change quotes here. I'm sorry. In general, I would say like doing captioning is worth it, no matter how you manage to do it. But this is more from the practitioner end. It's going to take some staff time and it's going to take some work to get these up and running, but do it. Like we have to do it. This is an imperative for making our spaces inclusive. But also around the cost side on the more practical end, I believe it was about $19,000 for a set of 5 glasses and tablets for the system that was using that particular day. And the amount of staff time for it was significantly higher compared to setting up captions on the dome. There was some staff time needed. It sounded like with the particular way the captions were done there, it was a lot more staff time than some current systems like what I have at my dome. It's a lot easier. It doesn't take that much time to do that. Also, if you have the files, like generally captioning on the dome is a relatively low additional cost to get it up and running compared to the technology. And in general, the consensus seemed to be that the dome captions were the preferred version from these 3. Again, with the understanding that as technology changes, as glasses change, there might be an option where that is a lot nicer. But the captions on the dome were a very low barrier way of getting accessibility onto the dome across the board, no matter how you looked at it. But the recommendations that came out as well, things to consider when you are captioning that make that experience better, are amber words came up a lot. So don't use white text, use amber text. It tends to work a little bit better on more backgrounds. Make it larger. Indicate when voices are changing. So if you have multiple narrators or characters, you want to make sure you are indicating when that voice changes, that you have a different person. Also, if no one is talking, if it's just mood music, take the text down. So don't have anything on there so that you know that it's an okay time to look around and experience the visuals uninterrupted. And therefore pace your show that you have those moments to be able to do that. So you never have like too many words on the screen at any time. And there was also one point within Big Astronomy where you have 2 people talking to one another, but it's not really part of the show. It's inaudible. Like you can hear that they're talking, but you don't really hear what they're saying. And it was just to kind of show a work environment. And so there were moments where people were confused because they thought they were supposed to be seeing captions then when they weren't. So you want to make sure that you indicate things like that. It was also noted things like it's really annoying to have to rely on technology all the time to participate. So having something like captions on the dome where it's just there and you don't have to do anything extra was appreciated. And again, that it was more inclusive for a lot of people who might want or benefit from captions who might not think to ask for them. So other things that sort of came out about all of this is ASL videos and interpretations are also very, very welcome and important, again, because not everyone who knows ASL is also literate in English. They are not the same language. SRT files and sign language interpretation videos should really be standard part of show packages. So that's an encouragement to show producers that as you send out shows, just like you send out an educator guide and a poster and all of that, these would be really nice things to include and build into the production of a show. Also, there are live portions or safety instructions. We had an interpreter there who could help with the safety instructions, but we don't have that all the time. So make sure that you have maybe get a video of someone doing the interpretation of your safety instructions to always have available, or live transcription. And then there are some best practices out there for the length of text on the dome at any period of time. And you might need to change the script slightly. It doesn't have to be word for word exactly the same, but it has to be the same meaning that you're getting across so that people can read it in a reasonable amount of time. And I believe Ryan Wyatt has written or was going to write an article on that because he wrote that SRT file. And again, I'm going to note the participant numbers on this were low and it was at a single institution. So this would be helpful to do more research around this with other versions of the technology. This was also a snapshot in time with what was available, and there are a lot more options that are coming onto the market. This was also a focus on pre-recorded shows and not live shows. So this is something that we also need to explore. I think that's the harder part of captioning, is the live part where we are interactive and exactly what we're going to say is not predetermined. And we need to look into some standardization, and so it makes it easier for all of us to offer this accessibility option, and not make everything idiosyncratic to our domes. All right, and that was from a different talk, so I will stop there and just open it to discussion. I see there's lots of chat, but I totally ignored it, so. There we go. I'll stop there.
So thank you, Shannon. There are some questions in the chat, but maybe first open it up and see if anybody wants to ask a question in person.
I have a question. Sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand feature. So Shannon, you mentioned that this was just for pre-recorded shows. Do you have any plans on doing research for live stuff soon in the future, or is that still in the works?
Yeah, I don't have any plans right now. It would be really nice. The issue is going to be funding. So this came out from supplemental funding for Big Astronomy, and that project is now officially over. So I have no more funding in that world. I'm happy to help and work with people. Also, I think a much larger study that is done in broader collaboration and co-creation with members of the deaf and hard of hearing community is what's really necessary. Like, I don't think I should be the one leading that. This was an opportunity to get some good information, but it's not. I think we need a lot more work done. Also, thank you, Mary, because you were helping us out those days.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Brian, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shannon. That was really helpful presentation. And I guess, I'll say that, I think what's on Mary's mind with her question is like at the Lawrence, we exclusively do live shows. So we really have to lean into, those live captioning situations. But I kind of want to echo something that Jeff was saying in the chat, and I think it's important to think about when producing shows, even live shows, is that if we're going to have captions, which of course we should just plan for them and kind of work that into your design of the show, right? So that, there's kind of a natural place to put the text so that people can see it very well, and that it's not covering up other things that you want people to be visually looking at, right? And so I think, always having accessibility as part of the design of your product in the first place is always the way to go. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
I agree. My hope and my plan in my dome is to make all of our shows just captioned, like just standard. It's captioned. Problem is not all shows have SRT files at the moment, so we have to go in and make our own. And so I'm trying to go through our library and do that. But I think in general, absolutely, we need it to be standard, and it's there. Like,
we'll take a few more live ones and then I'll make sure that some of the chat questions get in. Alan, do you want to go ahead?
Actually, I see Pat Rife has her hand raised. One of my comments was about Pat Rife's comment that having words on the dome actually are helpful for education for people learning languages. And I agree with that totally. But my other thought is that, since I'm from the live presentation world, that it's really important to have a mechanism, and the handheld solution is probably, the best for solving that problem. But I can understand I really appreciate the things that you said, Shannon, about the awkwardness of that. So I guess, have there been anybody, I guess the question to this audience is, has anybody explored getting a voice recognition that is displayed on the dome?
So I'll take that real quick. So I've been playing around with it because there is like Google Live Transcribe, and you can do that like on a computer. And within Digistar, you can share a screen now. So I have played around with like the size of that screen, and it picking it up. And we're not quite there, but I have a student who's also super interested in it. And I know that he has some kind of idea that he is working on. And I'm just hoping he doesn't crash my system in the process. But I think I don't know of anything quite yet, but I think that I don't think it's out of reach either, but maybe others have more information. And if you do, I want to know because I need.
So before Patricia goes, I'll just go to Joe's question about an iPhone app, could be an Android app, is held on a handheld device. And I think that's in conjunction with tools now available like Google Translate or Transcribe and Otter and some other programs. But so it's not on the dome, but it's just something that individuals are running on their own device. Shannon, could you say something about that? Or Joe, if that's not your question, can you jump in?
Yeah, I was thinking having having an app on their own iPhone that picks up the text from the film.
Yeah, I've done that with my phone just to test it out, just from picking it up, and I think it's a lot better. At one point, I know I was watching, I think, From Earth to the Universe, and apparently there were cars in Saturn, according to the live transcribe. So it's not a perfect solution. And that's one thing to keep in mind is accuracy. It needs to be accurate. And the live AI based ones are a lot better than they used to be. But having a live transcriber involved is always going to be the better option for accuracy. But that is an option also if people have something that works and they like it. It's just I think we generally have rules and ideas in planetariums as in part of our intros. Turn your phones off, please. So
Right,
maybe
yes.
if you're right, like if you want people to do that, maybe it's please turn your phones off unless you are using it for captioning, and then make sure you bring the brightness down or something like that. So I mean that's something to think about and consider is how do we actually introduce and talk about all of that.
All right,
But also this is again not my opinion. Like this is something we gotta go talk to people who use these phones and services and what they want and what they need.
Pat, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, two things. One, in relation to that previous topic, one thing that we considered doing, but we actually never ended up doing it, was having a on your phone a web page that's got the captions, and they just shoot a QR code on their phone, and it'll bring up the captions synced. But what we found worked better for us is just to have it in our software so we can click at whatever language we want at any time. The one thing that I noticed, the only downside for running the captions all the time is that they can be distracting. And so, again, one of the things in our software, if we know we've got hearing impaired, or if we know we've got English learners, we can tell the software to make the captions big, and that if we don't, we make them much smaller. And then I ask at the beginning of every show, do you all want the captions or not? If anybody says yes, we show the captions. But if not, they are kind of distracting if you've got stuff you want them to see on the sides and not be glued to the front center.
Audrey?
Hi, yeah, I was curious about what your process of making SRT files, if that's like something that someone could take on if they're using old software. And if your software actually can't take SRT files, what a good alternative could be.
I can jump in and say that for those who, either have subscriptions or have institutions with subscriptions, Adobe Premiere Pro can auto-generate pretty good captions from any video source that you give it. I don't know if there's other cheaper software that is that's as effective, but
Well, I've used YouTube to take videos. I upload them. They closed caption them. I can take the SRT file back down and edit it for accuracy. There's a little bit of work involved. There's another software product my school has called Panopto, which also will do a basically speech to text conversion into an SRT file. So there are a number of products out there that have speech to text built into them. Problem is always accuracy, and then you have to go back and do some editing.
Yeah, I've done YouTube before, and we have media space, but yeah, you do have to go in and do the editing for accuracy and length. I think for this one, it was I'm not sure what Ryan did to get the captions on there. But there are quite a few services that will auto generate, so then all you have to do is edit and not do it yourself.
I noticed Dario said something in the chat about, I guess, his earlier version of Sky Explorer supported SRT files. And I guess that's the other part of an SRT file is normally you want to have the titles synced with the content. And I don't know how many full dome systems support SRT files so that when you play back a full dome show, if you have a method of getting the SRT onto the dome, there are a couple different ways of doing that, but will it be in sync?
I know Digistar does, and we usually have to go edit the timing a little bit.
Yeah, the timing's in the SRT file. What time you want that caption to show up and what time you want it to quit. And so as long as you haven't changed the show itself, the captions should be on the way you want it. And because you can put the end time, you don't have to have a caption on the screen at all times, which is good. But it's straightforward. It's just a text file. I mean, it's not hard.
So I have a question because I don't think the system we use currently takes SRT files. And so I thought I can add one video on top of another and do something like that and perhaps have a video that scrolls at the bottom. But I would need to do some software myself in order to take an SRT file and turn it into something like that. Is there anything that takes an SRT file and turns it into a series of those snippets on the screen or
Blender
in a
can do it.
video?
Say that again because you were cut out.
Yeah, Blender can do it.
Blender can do it. Okay.
I
So
think you can. There are a lot of products for doing like producing videos with captions, and a number of them could be used. You probably could do it with an Adobe product. I use something called Camtasia, but I think there are just a number of things you could grab. Some of them you might find for free, some of them you might have to pay for. I think it'd be a good topic to maybe start a small web page on of resources.
But
resources.
I think I'll also,
Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I think that like all of this stuff is really good and for us to get things up and running now. But I think this is also something where we need to be pushing standardization throughout the industry on how we do this so that it's just it's just there, right? Like, and it's very easy for us that if we get a show, we have it and our systems can run SRT. So absolutely, like we want to be doing all of this, but also anytime you get a new system or there's an opportunity to talk to the people who make your system, be like, hey, do
So
this.
Shannon, that's a great segue to a question I've been kind of wanting to ask. So on my campus, we have a disabled student program, and the director of the program came to me recently and basically has said, our school got sued for not providing disability services for a hearing impaired person. And they basically said, we don't want to get sued again. So, Benjamin, any program you do in the planetarium, you have to have some kind of support service available, which effectively means I can't show any shows until I get this. So we've been exploring, I've been exploring some options. That's why I was so glad for this timely presentation. But one question that comes up in my research is, theaters are required by the American Disabilities Act to support people with disabilities, which would include this type of thing. And then when you start thinking about, well, is it just a hearing impaired person or a deaf person or a sight impaired person? How many different types of disabilities, shall I say, is a theater required to support under the law? So there's one question. What legally do we have to do? I know very few planetariums that have this technology available, and yet we're open like theaters. And we should be supporting, obviously, federal law and providing these things. This is just an open-ended question. I just wanted to throw it out there. Thoughts and any experiences, if anyone has any.
Yes, I would jump in. JT Town, I was with Spitz, Evans, and Sutherland for a number of years, supplying systems to, sites all over the country. Typically, the requirement was just some amplified sound. So I'm pretty sure, that was what the company felt like was the only requirement for some time. A lot of your theaters could make the case that you're not the same as an entertainment theater. If you wanted to, but I know you're leaning towards Benjamin saying that you want to do the right thing. But I guess, yeah, we should probably all go look it up on the federal website and see if there's anything more that's been added.
So Benjamin, were you going to say something on this topic?
I was actually going to type an answer in the chat to Patricia, but I'm concerned that, I don't know if any planetariums have had any litigation, but I can see it happening right in our litigious society at some point down the road. And then I'm just kind of wondering, since there are, I have an assisted listening system as JT just described, but I'm being told that's inadequate. I need to supply more types of things. We had a vision impaired person in our theater not too long ago. And so someone acted as a live narrator through I'll call it a walkie-talkie, not quite. It was a hearing device with a transmitter, but they were narrating what was going on throughout the program for this person who was visually impaired. So, once again, I'm trying to wrap my mind around the complexity of the problem as well as, how to satisfy as many disabilities as possible.
Abby, I think Albie, excuse me, I think this gets into your question. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask about the ASL interpreter?
Sure. I was just wondering about recommendations, if it's better to have a live ASL interpreter in the, now this is show specific, in the space, and how would you light them so the audience can see them, versus having like closed captioning, actually having, like whether live or pre-recorded video of ASL interpreter on the dome. I don't know if anyone has recommendations or experience with those two options.
So I think you want to be able to have both available, because not everyone will speak ASL and not everyone will speak English. And so um, I think you want to make sure that you can offer both. And what I have heard is if you are doing ASL interpretation, it can't just be hands. Like I've heard things like glow in the dark gloves. It's not just hands, it's facial expression. So everything has to be lit up. And so we've usually done like we have a red light like on a stand that can like be a little more focused. And so we use the red light to make sure that they are fully lit up. And we also always check in with anyone.
On the dome, though, I didn't mean
captioning
captioning on the dome. I literally meant having
I'm sorry.
ASL interpreter on the dome as opposed to live.
No, I've
Like,
never done
so
that.
if you have like a pre-recorded show and having pre-recorded, is it better to have pre-recorded ASL interpreter like on the screen or video? That's what I was meaning. The ASL
Okay, I'm sorry.
on the screen versus on the ground with a light or whatever.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm Colin Hudson from Think Tank. Our Ma Planetarium are doing just that. They've got several shows and they've created a BSL, British Sign Language video that goes on, and they've, I think, put an alpha channel, so they've been able to put that on. And they're also doing Macathon and a lot of, I think they caption pretty much every single one of their shows. So it would be worth reaching out to the folk at Armagh for some more advice on that, because they've done quite a lot in exploring it as this now.
I just want to say I threw a quick URL. This is a technology my DESP department looked into. I haven't actually seen it yet, but they offer a service of doing ASL, which they'll project onto the glasses while you're watching the program. So they'll produce either subtitles or an actual ASL interpreter being projected into the glasses. Obviously, the fee structure is something to be considered, but some folks are trying to address that.
Amy?
I had wanted to add a comment going back to what Albie and Shannon were talking about regarding the ASL interpreter. Shannon, you said that when you're doing it in your dome, you have a red light on them. But what about the negative connotations with red lights? I mean, we've tried to avoid it because I know, especially with autistic students or guests that may also need the ASL interpretation, red means no, stop, bad. And having a red light on the interpreter is kind of off-putting for some visitors. Have you considered that at all?
No, we do always check in. So it's usually with school groups. So they have someone who has already come with the kids. So we are, we'll check in with them. We explain that we have the red light and why we use the red light in the dome. And we can always swap out for a white light if they prefer. So we have not thought about that, and that is a good thing, and I'll definitely keep that in mind. And also, I always just try to check in to make sure that something is working, and if it's not, how do we fix it? And just be ready to be flexible for each group that comes in. But that's a good point.
Daria?
Okay, I have a question for Shannon. Please forgive me if this has been said earlier. The devices you use in your study, were they opaque, where they showed the captions, or more like augmented reality, where we can see what's behind?
So on the tablet, it was more opaque. It was just, black screen with white text, and you could adjust that. The glasses were transparent, so you would be able to see the dome through it.
Okay. Another one was, I think it was for Albie, about the sign language interpreter to be projected on the dome. This may be a bit crazy, but I imagine like a genie floating on a little cloud, wandering through points of interest in the in the screen. Just a crazy idea.
That's kind of an interesting one, though, kind of make it almost more fun that you can actually move, like incorporate the location of the ASL interpreter to wherever they're supposed to be. That's actually really cool. I'm gonna mind that. I like that. You can have a lot of fun with that. I like that. Someone is mentioning the purple light. Oh, that's Colin again. So instead of a red light, you're saying that the purple light works really well?
Sorry, I'm going to unmute here. Certainly for things like low-level lighting, most places will use red lighting because of that. But they did think about red for danger, so they've found a kind of deep purple is a fairly good compromise. Whether they do that for BSL interpretation, I'm not sure. Their dome is big enough that they could probably light up with a white light and an umbrella to stop light catching onto the dome. But again, Winchester and Armagh are pretty much leading accessibility in the UK just now.
That's really cool, though. I've not just heard of another light, though. That sounds like fun. I like purple. All right. Thank you.
I have one question for Shannon. It has to do with your slide where you had results. If you could put that back up. I think it's the one before that. It's the one that says results at the top, dome captions generally preferred. And then it had that show. Yeah. So my question, based on not having any experience with captioning in my planetarium, is and I think you have a Digistar system. Do you have control over these things, or do you not have any control over these things?
So in Digistar, we do. We are able to change a lot of things, especially with our current our latest upgrade. We didn't have that with the version that we were using in the study. Those were sort of predetermined, and those are run by the folks at Cal Academy. But I know within our system now, we do have that control. We can be like, make it bigger or smaller, or change the color or the font. So, but not all systems do allow that.
Okay, thanks. Can you stop sharing for a second? Okay, I just wanted to mention people have asked about resources and also the EDI committee of the IPS. So there are some resources mentioned in the chat if you want to save the chat. Danny, you're here. I'm not sure if you want to say anything or not, but I I think in the spirit of trying to get producers of videos and also manufacturers to adhere possibly to some standards is something that I've heard today. We're also coming up on 11 o'clock, and I don't intend to stop right now, but if you do need to leave, feel free to leave at any time. And anyway, it's been a really great session. There's a lot of good things in the chat, and the recording will be on the YouTube channel for I think it's called PPA officers. It'll be up in a day or two.
I just want to compliment Shannon that this has been, I mean, seems like I always say this, but this has been one of the best seminars. But this has been especially good in terms of stimulating discussion. And I really am happy to see that. And people from all over the world have come in. It's really, really good to see. And so thanks, Shannon.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean,
And thanks to all of you and all the work you do.
A lot of these things we knew kind of by experience, but it's great to have the statistics and really have the people who need do the review of it. That's really important and as you know, scientifically valid.
Remember, more work always has to be done.
So I'm gonna go ahead, I think, and stop the recording. If you want to hang out, have more questions for Shannon for a few more minutes, that's fine. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming today.